How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to be addressing the Third Circuit's recent ruling that magazine limitations is constitutional, doesn't violate the Second Amendment, which is in direct contrast to what we recently saw in the Ninth Circuit in Duncan v. Becerra, where that Ninth Circuit court found that these magazine restrictions does violate the Second Amendment. So let's talk about these. But real quick, before we jump into this video, if you think that magazine limitations, magazine bans like this are completely unconstitutional and violate the Second Amendment, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I also want to give a big shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, Franklin Armory. Franklin Armory is an amazing company. They provide amazing products to California residents, but also people throughout the US. People who are in free states can buy things like the binary triggers, but they also have things on the market for people like us in the state of California, like the 3 California compliant AR pistols. So go over to Franklin Armory, show them support, and thank you Franklin Armory for sponsoring the channel. So a lot of you have been asking me questions about the Third Circuit's recent ruling finding that magazine restrictions in the state of New Jersey were indeed constitutional, didn't violate the Second Amendment, and some of the rationales that they had in that specific case. And a lot of you specifically had questions about this case in relation to Duncan v. Becerra. Many of you are familiar with Duncan v. Becerra. It is a case arising out of the state of California, and the magazine restrictions that we have here in the state of California very much identical to what has happened in New Jersey, where there are magazine restrictions where you cannot have a magazine with more than 10 rounds. Recently, after that 3-judge panel decision in Duncan v. Becerra, we had another circuit court, the Third Circuit, actually look at the New Jersey state's regulations on magazine capacity. These cases are very similar, but what actually happened in the Third Circuit, they did something directly different from what the Ninth Circuit 3-judge panel did. Contrary to what we saw in Duncan v. Becerra, this specific case in the Third Circuit actually found that the law in the state of New Jersey does not strike at the core of the Second Amendment, and they actually applied intermediate scrutiny, which is very different from the strict scrutiny which was applied in Duncan v. Becerra in the Ninth Circuit. So I'll just read for you real quick what the Third Circuit panel said in this case, but essentially what they found was that the restriction in the state of New Jersey does not strike at the core of the Second Amendment. This is actually very different from what we saw in Duncan v. Becerra, where the Ninth Circuit 3-judge panel actually said that a magazine restriction does strike at the core of the Second Amendment. So here you can see two different circuit courts, the Ninth Circuit and the Third Circuit, saying something completely different about magazine restrictions. One court is saying that a magazine restriction and restrictions on magazines strikes at the core of what the Second Amendment protects. And another circuit, the Third Circuit, is saying that a magazine restriction does not strike at the core of the Second Amendment and that magazine restrictions doesn't affect the Second Amendment. So here you can see we have some panel splits, and we've had panel splits on this issue in the past, but it's very interesting because this is happening in a very short amount of time, in almost a 2-week span. We got a ruling by the 3-judge panel in the Ninth Circuit, and then soon after that, we got a 3-judge panel ruling in the Third Circuit. So the 3-judge panel said that this New Jersey law does not strike at the core of the Second Amendment for 5 main reasons. So let's take a look at those 5 main reasons. The first reason is that it does not categorically ban a class of firearms, but is rather a ban out of a subset of magazines. So they are kind of parsing out here, first saying that magazines are not arms, that they are not pretty much protected by the Second Amendment, and that they're saying that it does not ban magazines at large, but just a subset. So they're kind of trying to skirt around magazines being protected by the Second Amendment, I think by saying, one, that magazines are not arms, which is different from what the Ninth Circuit said. The Ninth Circuit did find that magazines are part of arms, but also the Third Circuit here is saying that they are not categorically banning these magazines, so it does not strike at the core of the Second Amendment. They also say that it is not a prohibition of a class of arms overwhelmingly chosen for Americans for self-defense in the home. Again, this is directly different from what the Ninth Circuit said, where they said that magazines are a part of self-defense. People use these for self-defense. So here you are starting to see that we have the Ninth Circuit and the Third Circuit pretty much not mirroring each other at all. They are contradicting each other pretty much on every point. The third thing that they say is that the New Jersey statute does not disarm or substantially affect Americans' ability to defend themselves. Again, contradictory to what the Ninth Circuit said, where they said that limiting magazine capacity does affect an individual's ability to self-defense or defend themselves. So again, we're seeing all these contradictions from the circuit courts. Fourth, they said that the New Jersey residents can still possess and use magazines just with fewer rounds. And the final thing that they said is that it cannot be the case that possession of a firearm in the home for self-defense is protected form of possession under all circumstances. By this rationale, any type of firearm possessed in the home would be protected merely because it can be used for self-defense. So here the Third Circuit is kind of harking back to what we see in Heller and McDonald, where they talk about self-defense in the home commonly used firearms are protected by the Second Amendment. And so here the Third Circuit's saying that just because it can be used for self-defense, potentially in the home, does not mean that there is a blanket protection. The Third Circuit is pretty much parsing this out from other things like we saw in the Ninth Circuit, where the Ninth Circuit was much more protective of commonly used arms, commonly used things that are used for self-defense, for things like in your home. So what does this mean for people like us in the state of California? We are waiting for an en banc panel review of that Duncan v. Becerra case. We had a favorable ruling by the 3-judge panel in Duncan v. Becerra where they found that the state of California's magazine restriction violated the Second Amendment, but now we're waiting to see what the en banc panel says. So how would this Third Circuit ruling play into that? The Ninth Circuit is not bound by what the Third Circuit says. So just because the Third Circuit has this ruling, this recent ruling saying that magazine restrictions does not violate the Second Amendment, does not mean that is binding on the Ninth Circuit and they have to follow that. The Ninth Circuit is its completely own entity. They follow their own precedent. And the only thing that they are absolutely obligated to follow is a Supreme Court ruling. What is likely to happen, though, is that the Attorney General's office will point to this recent Third Circuit ruling, saying that, hey, very recently another circuit court has found that magazine restrictions is constitutional, doesn't violate the Second Amendment, and also that intermediate scrutiny should be applied to these types of cases. Like we saw in Duncan v. Becerra, the AG's office and their main contention for why they're seeking en banc panel review has to do with the level of scrutiny that should have been applied. The Attorney General's office in Duncan v. Becerra believes that intermediate scrutiny should have been used instead of strict scrutiny, and they are likely going to point to the Third Circuit's recent ruling saying, look, the Third Circuit used intermediate scrutiny in making their decision. The Ninth Circuit en banc panel should also do the same, and they'll put forward some other evidence and arguments also why they put forward things like FIOC, which is a Ninth Circuit court, which had some dealings with large capacity magazine restrictions. So they'll put forward that FIOC case, which they did in their en banc panel review, but they are likely also going to point to this Third Circuit panel case as well, probably during arguments and stuff like that. So it is likely going to be used. Whether or not it'll be persuasive, we don't know. It's completely up to the makeup of the en banc panel. But a lot of you also have questions in regards to what implications does this have at the larger scale. So I would guess at some point we might see a magazine restriction case make it up to the Supreme Court, or at least someone will be seeking a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court. Whether or not they will take that up, we don't know. The Supreme Court has been hesitant as of late taking up Second Amendment cases, and in fact, they kicked 10 Second Amendment cases. But what I like about these cases and the controversy that has arisen out of these two circuit court splits has to do with the level of scrutiny that needs to be applied to Second Amendment cases, and specifically magazine restrictions. So this is the type of case that the Supreme Court would like to take because they can really clarify off of their previous cases, Heller and McDonald, about the level of scrutiny that should be applied to varying Second Amendment issues. And this, when you're dealing with level of scrutiny, this is the type of things that the Supreme Court likes. This is the type of things that they like to clarify and the type of cases they like to take up. So I think it's good and bad that the Third Circuit has ruled this way. It's bad in regards to, you'll probably see the AG's office in the Ninth Circuit pointing to the Third Circuit as a reason why the en banc panel should actually overrule what the 3-judge panel said in the Ninth Circuit. And it's also bad because, of course, you have this new case precedent in the Third Circuit saying that magazine restrictions are constitutional, it doesn't violate the Second Amendment, as well as you should apply intermediate scrutiny to them. So it's bad in that regard, but it's good in regards as you have this key controversy arising in the Second Amendment realm, and it is a perfect issue that you could see going up to the Supreme Court for clarity. And we are just waiting for the perfect Second Amendment case for the Supreme Court to take up and really clarify and protect our Second Amendment rights. So I know a lot of you are asking me about this Third Circuit ruling and how it might impact the Ninth Circuit's recent ruling in Duncan v. Becerra. That's potentially how the impact might be, is you'll probably just see some reference to the Third Circuit, but keep in mind it is not binding precedent. The Ninth Circuit does not have to follow what the Third Circuit says. But it's also good because it kind of shows that there is this key controversy between circuits. There's a circuit split, and we really need the Supreme Court to actually resolve these issues, because right now you have a bunch of different circuits ruling in completely different ways, and we need guidance from the highest court that we have about how we're actually supposed to deal with these cases. And that's when you really see the Supreme Court take up issues, is when you have a bunch of different circuits in a short amount of time ruling in very different ways. If you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is join the Patreon page, and I'll put a link down below. Also, just like, commenting, subscribing, and make sure you hit the notification bell, because all that stuff helps the analytics, helps the spread of the word about the Second Amendment, and also helps spread the word about what's going on here in the state of California. Also, just sharing helps us break through the analytics, because a lot of time these videos get suppressed after an amount of time because YouTube doesn't like that the word about the Second Amendment is getting spread. So as always, thanks you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.